The scalding coffee ran down my fingers and soaked the paper of the forged contract. It tasted like burnt rubber and smelled like server dust. The cup was cracked. Maybe like me, it was the last cup of the day, and the first after the silence. My name is Caleb Turner. I'm 39, a systems developer and digital listening specialist. I spent the last 3 years designing a platform to protect what doesn't always show up in reports, the voice of someone breaking inside. I didn't build it for innovation. I built it because I almost blacked out in front of a manager who thought empathy was a feature, not a principle. Since that day, I've worked alone, quiet, with everything saved in triple backup. Josh was still in the next room, his voice low, almost a technical whisper, trying to convince an investor over Zoom that the platform bug was just a bit of network instability. I knew it wasn't. The code I wrote was falling asleep, exactly as planned. But before that, I had to break. 3 nights earlier, I heard Lindsay laughing in the background of the launch livestream. The same laugh she had when she'd watch me sketch ideas on napkins at age 14. She used to say I was too inventive for this family. It sounded like affection. It became a weapon. On screen, she looked flawless. Dark suit, hair tied up. Next to her was Josh with that intuitive CEO aura he copied from documentaries. They introduced themselves as co-founders of a new corporate feedback platform. Name, Loop. The same platform that was born from my burnout, my therapist, and the code I wrote while taking Klonopin with black coffee in 2022. I built it to help people like me not break at work. Now it was in their hands. Josh was my friend. Lindsay was my sister. And I was the ghost co-founder. I didn't show up in the presentation, not in the business registration, not in the story told to the media. They said the idea came during a trip to Napa. We wanted to create a space where listening is safe, empathetic, and data-driven. I watched from the corner of a co-working space, alone, surrounded by loud freelancers in neon headphones and sticker-covered laptops. My whole world was on that screen, in the wrong hands. When it ended, I didn't go home. I stayed in the print room until dawn. The fading toner made a dry screech. It sounded like dying breath. I printed the intellectual property transfer contract Josh had sent me days earlier. He said it was just a formality, signed by me, except I never signed it. The forgery was good, but not perfect. The C in Caleb was too round. The final stroke wasn't mine. And worst of all, they used our father's birthday as the password to lock the file. I stared at that detail for minutes. It was the kind of betrayal that doesn't scream. It just dissolves. Lindsay called the next morning. She pretended everything was normal. Caleb, I want you to know we're doing our best to represent your vision. I know you're not big on the spotlight. I simply said, Loop is running old code. The behavior's about to change. Silence. She understood. She knew what that meant. Because what no one knew, not Lindsay, not Josh, not the beige-suited investor on Zoom, was that the code they were using still belonged entirely to me, not just legally. But technically, it was hosted on my personal server, encrypted, and with a hidden trigger, an emotional integrity algorithm that would activate a silent mode if it detected trust abuse. Yes, literally that. Something I built after I was fired, by email, while sedated, in 2021. Loop's AI read micro-expressions and voice patterns, and if it sensed hostility between its creators, it would shut the system down. Subtly, without trace, the investor call would freeze, the data would disappear, and the prototype would return to zero. But before all that, I broke. The night of the presentation, I walked into the co-working restroom. Third stall on the right, the one no one really cleans. I ripped the contract page by page, flushed the pieces, poured the rest of my coffee on top, watched the black ink swirl downward, mixed with drops that looked like dried blood. Josh walked, in singing Coldplay. You only need the light when it's burning low. The sound of the door slamming echoed behind me. I froze, but I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't move. I just memorized the melody. Back at my desk, I spoke to no one. Opened the platform console, entered my master login, the one they didn't even know existed, and activated a protocol they believed was disabled. Just one command. Silent, invisible, In 48 hours, the system would begin to fail. Not by mistake, by design. They say the perfect revenge is the one where the betrayed feels guilty. And for a while, I almost did. Almost. It started as kindness. Lindsay started working from the same co-working space, saying she missed being close to my creative world. She said my whiteboard scribbles inspired her. She brought Josh a few weeks later. He was between gigs, a user experience freelancer, a title that meant nothing. But he spoke well, sold well, always had a pitch on the tip of his tongue. They came often. I shared my notebooks, my prototypes, my testing system, showed them the flows, the predictive behaviors, the empathetic listening AI I was building. Man, this is brilliant, Josh would say. But you've got to think like a founder. You think like a tech guy. Lindsay agreed. Caleb, you're a genius. But the world needs to hear this through a different voice. It sounded like praise. Now I know it was a rehearsed justification. They started helping me informally. Josh offered branding tips. Lindsay tested the app with friends from her old agency. I allowed it. I thought it was family. I thought it was trust. One Friday night, Josh brought wine to the co-working space. It was just us three. I had just finished the first functional version of the platform. Demo running. AI operating on real conversation patterns. Lindsay was euphoric. This could change how companies actually listen to people. It's not just an app. It's a culture. Josh filmed the scene, captured clips of me explaining how the system worked, said it was just from memory. 2 days later, they sent me a contract. They called it a pre-cooperation agreement. I skimmed through it, tired. I trusted them. I signed. But the final paragraph made me suspicious. I saved a separate copy and started watching. A month later, Josh asked for access to the database, said an investor he knew was interested, wanted to build a pitch deck, just visual, nothing operational. I gave him limited access, read-only, but the login IP showed he cloned the database, exported every entry, and created a mirrored environment on AWS under a different name, Idea.But. I took screenshots. I didn't confront them. Not yet. On a call with Lindsay, I asked, "Do you still believe this is our project?" She hesitated for just a second, then said, "Of course, Cal. We're just professionalizing it. You don't have to carry this alone." That was the moment I knew. I was already out. The Echo Loop website went live 3 weeks later. A brand new domain, registered by Josh. Same design, same tone, same features. Except for one thing, no mention of my name. The launch video had Lindsay narrating the project's origin as something born from the corporate frustration she and her husband had endured over the years. I paused right there. I couldn't watch any further. That same day, I received a second contract, a co-authorship acknowledgement with tacit rights transfer. This time, my signature was already there. Copied, forged. Josh sent it with the line, "We need this to move forward with investors. Just a formality." Like we agreed. We never agreed on anything. I investigated the PDF. It was a boilerplate. NDA modified by an AI. Metadata said generated by legalbot.io. But the original file name was still there. Template Acquisition Lindsay Edit 2. That is how they erased me. By editing my existence into newer versions. The company was registered in Delaware. The address? A boutique co-working space in Portland. Josh used as a virtual office. The business name? Loop Eco Inc. They reversed the name to throw off public database searches, but they didn't stop there. Lindsay used my client history to schedule meetings with companies I had previously contacted for pilot testing. She mimicked my tone, used my old email drafts, used my words. The pitch was always the same. We provide empathetic intelligence for HR, developed by a team of specialists in behavior and data. Specialists. I was the only one, until I wasn't. I slowly pulled back, removed my LinkedIn tagline that said, "Founder of a stealth stage startup," deleted old posts, archived evidence, duplicated backups, filed a preventive report. I waited, not with anger, with precision. The hardest part wasn't accepting the betrayal. It was realizing they thought I'd do nothing, like my silence was weakness, like I was just the basement nerd. What they didn't know is I was in the basement, laying wires. I didn't talk to anyone about what had happened, except one person. I met Eleanor 3 years earlier. She was a tax consultant and former IRS auditor, with eyes that could spot irregularities from miles away. I kept digging on my own. My days turned into silent shifts. Mornings at a co-working space, afternoons at home, nights with headphones on, analyzing documents. We worked together on an old case, a startup trying to manipulate charitable donation deductions. She took them down. With spreadsheets, I sent her a coded message on a Sunday. Need to map something discrete. Involves IP theft and contract fraud between relatives. She replied in 30 seconds. I'll need full access and decent pizza. The next day, I brought 2 boxes to her apartment. One with printed folders, the other with external drives. Eleanor was methodical, never showed surprise, just asked blunt questions. Did you sign anything with witnesses? No. Do you have version logs of the code with metadata? Yes, all timestamped and authenticated on Git. Did she use your client base? Every single lead was mine. She just took notes, in silence. While she built the legal scaffolding, I started my own movement. No impulses, no noise. I began sending emails to myself with attachments, screenshots, videos, every line of code with time logs, labeled with tags like tech ownership, NDA violation, forgery. I sent them to a backup account hosted by a European provider, end-to-end encrypted. I also opened an anonymous channel with a litigation-focused startup forum. One of the moderators was a retired Supreme Court judge from Nevada. I just watched, for now. Then I went back to the co-working space. Late at night, the place smelled like damp carpet and burnt coffee. I brought my laptop, my brown notebook, and a physical copy of everything. I accessed Echo Loop's backend. Ironically, they never revoked my old permissions. Josh thought he knew what he was doing, but he didn't know what to look for. I did a full backup, found code changes made by a freelance intern they hired off-platform, paid with a new corporate card. The name on the receipt, Lindsay. She had titled herself Product Director in the new company. I captured it all. I also tracked data transmissions. They had begun collecting real user info from partner companies. That directly violated the prototype's original terms of use clause I had embedded. It was enough for formal charges, but it wasn't time yet. The following Friday, Eleanor called me with the calmest voice in the world. I found what we needed. They used your name as the base for the original domain registration. You're listed as the original author in the metadata of the first license. We can back that up with 3 external authentication certificates. Is that enough to file a lawsuit? More than enough, but I wouldn't recommend it. Yet. Why not? Because this isn't just about justice. It's about structure. And structure takes time. We hung up. I walked over to the cafe next door, got an iced tea, sat at a corner table. A couple was whispering through an argument. A delivery guy yelled someone's name, and me, in the middle of it all, felt a strange kind of peace. The kind that comes when you know the storm is coming, but you've already built your shelter. I started drafting a dossier, line by line. Each chapter was a puzzle piece. I compiled it into a PDF with an interactive table of contents. Title, Echo Loop, Ownership, Breach, and Proof. I sent it to Eleanor and printed a hard copy, folded it, and placed it inside the brown notebook, the same one I used to sketch the platform's original concept 2 years earlier. The first page still read, in blue ink, Ideas are fragile until you give them structure. The following week, Eleanor messaged me. Got the right lawyer. Ex-IP litigator, former Marine. He'll understand the silence. We scheduled a call. His name was Howard Miller. Quiet voice. Short sentences. He didn't ask how I felt. He just wanted the facts. Do you want to go at them head on or let them hang themselves? I want the institutions to speak for me. He smiled. You're going to like what I'm building. For the next 20 days, life went on as if nothing had happened. Josh and Lindsay celebrated at events, posted photos with motivational captions, and hashtags like My Startup Life and iTech for Good. I just watched, archived stories, downloaded videos, saved deleted posts. The trap was almost set. and my patience untouched. The first clue of something bigger came during a casual comment from Howard on a Zoom call. These mirror contracts, I've seen them before, especially among startups incubated in alternative funds. I asked him to elaborate. Howard explained he had reviewed 4 recent cases of stolen IP, all from startups founded by couples, all registered in Delaware, all pitching ESG or tech with purpose, all with subtle forgeries, and 3 of them linked back to the same angel investment fund, Stonebridge Ventures, based in Portland, where Josh had contacts. I messaged Eleanor, check if Stonebridge appears in the Echo Loop registration. Records. 5 minutes later, she replied with a screenshot. The fund had been a silent shareholder in Loop Echo Inc. since day one. My stomach sank. This wasn't just personal betrayal, it was engineered. A network. Josh wasn't just ambitious. He was part of an ecosystem that fed on isolated talent, vulnerable ideas, and emotionally driven founders. I ran a reverse IP lookup on Echo Loop's backend. One unusual login came from a co-working space in Boise, Idaho. Full admin access. Username, Richie M. Tech. I searched LinkedIn, Richard Morales, former product director at a startup called SafeLink AI, which coincidentally was accused in 2021 of plagiarizing a behavioral monitoring platform created by a solo female engineer. The original startup vanished. SafeLink AI got acquired. The pattern was clear. Steal, accelerate, discard. I sent everything to Howard and Eleanor. Is this enough to classify as an organization? I asked. Howard replied bluntly, not legally, yet, but it's close. Eleanor added, they have a modus operandi. And now, we have a repeat pattern. It's just a matter of documenting it. I slept little, but I wasn't tired. It was focus, surgical. One day, reviewing a live stream where Lindsay talked about corporate empathy in startups, I noticed something in the background. A whiteboard. On it, a diagram I recognized. Fully mine. Every line, every arrow. The flow I had drawn in my brown notebook. The detail no one else would notice. A small equation in the bottom corner. An emotional latency formula. Something I'd never shared publicly. The camera had caught it by accident. But to me, it was a signature. Screenshotted. Filed. Another piece. 2 days later, Eleanor called. Remember the intern who modified the code? Yeah. He's on payroll at 2 other startups linked to Stonebridge. Same business tax ID, small tech service. Payments. Repeating pattern. The guy was a pawn, hired to modify code just enough to claim co-authorship, without knowing what he was really doing. I asked for the names of the other startups. One of them rang a bell. MindBridge Metrics. In 2020, they launched an API that resembled an old model I had built for emotional analysis in call centers. I tracked down the original prototype's creator, Marsha Green, an engineer in Seattle. I sent a cautious message, said I had a question about an old API. She replied with a link to an old post, a veiled but clear confession for those who read carefully. Some ideas are ripped from us by hands that once felt like friends. We spoke over an encrypted call. She described the process. It was identical to mine, a boyfriend, a stolen pitch, an investor who got too interested too quickly, and a contract she later learned had transferred ownership without her knowledge. We stayed silent for a few seconds. Are you going after them? She asked. Not directly. I'm just going to line up the dominoes and tip the first one. Marsha chuckled, softly. Then let me know when they fall. The following week, Howard compiled a legal dossier, cross-referencing all the cases. Eleanor added the corporate ties between the companies. I added the technical data, screenshots, videos, and original code. It became a 312-page document. Filler name, echopattern.pdf cover title, Connections between Loop Echo Inc., Stonebridge Ventures, and the systematic exploitation of intellectual property through pre-established emotional bonds. I sent out 3 copies, none with my name, but all of them knew where to look. The first went to a lawyer who once won a patent theft case against a major tech company and never gave another interview again. The second, to an investigative journalist who lost his job after exposing a venture fund tied to data manipulation in political campaigns. He now publishes independently and goes deeper. The third, to a former SEC director, Today, she quietly analyzes funds that invest too much, too fast in all the wrong projects, and pulls threads until she finds the center of the web. I didn't ask for replies. I just let the truth land where it needed to. Wednesday, 11:47 a.m. Josh opened the Echo Loop app live during a panel about emotional innovation in companies. The stream had over 1,000 viewers. The system crashed. It wasn't a loud error. It was subtle. The graphs disappeared. The data evaporated. The interface turned blank, like it was under construction. Josh stuttered. "Looks like we're having some temporary instability." Lindsay forced a smile, said it was part of the beta phase. But in that moment, something shifted. The silence on screen spread. Sponsors began sending private messages. The lead investor, Spencer Hall, typed into the chat, "This wasn't in the technical roadmap you showed me." That same afternoon, the Wired journalist published an article, "The Listening Culture That Listened to No One: The Hidden Threads Behind Echo Loop." It didn't name names directly, but it laid out the entire pattern, the history of plagiarism, the ties to Stonebridge, the signs of IP fraud. It used phrases like corporate emotional manipulation and investors complicit through selective silence. The article went viral on LinkedIn within hours. Former employees from other startups recognized the tactics. A former intern from Mindbridge commented, "I thought I was crazy for doubting. Now I know I was just disposable." 2 days later, the SEC issued a public memo. "We are launching an investigation into intellectual property acquisition practices involving venture funds tied to Stonebridge Ventures." Josh tried to deny everything on Twitter, claimed there was nothing illegal, and that haters always show up when you're growing. The replies? A thread of legal experts saying, "You should delete this and hire a real attorney." The four. Next Monday, Elena sent me a link. It was a video posted by a well-known tech and ethics influencer. He dismantled the entire Echo Loop story, with screenshots, code excerpts, and even the clip of Lindsay presenting the project, with my diagram visible in the background. At the end of the video, he said, "If you're someone who's built something and had it stolen, know this: you're not alone. Sometimes the quiet ones are just collecting and waiting for the right moment." The video hit over 600,000 views in 3 days. Tuesday, Investor Hall released a statement. He had pulled his capital from Loop Echo Inc. and said he felt misled about the origin of the technology. Josh deleted all his social media. Lindsay, for the first time, posted something without makeup. A poorly lit video, trembling voice. It wasn't an apology. It was an attempt to justify. She said she never meant to erase anyone, and that she didn't know what Josh was doing with the contracts. In the comments, someone wrote, "You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Being complicit out of convenience is still a choice." By the end of that week, Echo Loop was dropped from its accelerator. They both lost access to the company's account. And more importantly, they lost their reputation. Their names became synonymous with subtle fraud in the tech world. That night, Howard called. "The investor wants a deal, wants to distance himself. He's willing to admit due diligence failure and officially recognize you as the original author. In return, he wants no lawsuit." I asked. "And Lindsay?" Silence. "She's in meetings with a legal team. Says she was manipulated. Says she didn't know. But there are messages, videos. Her name is on receipts. They want a settlement. They want silence." I stared at my brown notebook for a while. The edges were fading, the pages beginning to peel. "They'll get it. Silence? No. Exposure." The next morning, Tech Memo published an article by Marcia Green. She, who had also been a victim of a similar scam, now wrote about the quiet structures of intellectual theft. In the article, she referenced my case. No name, just one line. "Some systems break when the strongest link falls. Others break when that link decides not to fix anything anymore. Just watch it collapse." Echo Loop never came back online. The site went offline. Stonebridge Ventures was formally notified, and an independent committee began mapping the connections between startups using the same pattern. Josh disappeared. Lindsay too. And me? I just printed the final version of the dossier and filed it in a manila envelope, slipped it into the brown notebook, and closed the drawer. No noise, no trophies, just justice, delivered at the right volume. 6 months later, the co-working building was sold. A friend told me the new management took down all the motivational quotes from the walls. They said they no longer fit the user's profile. The irony made me smirk. I never stepped foot in there again. I left Austin for Flagstaff, Arizona. Small town, dry air, low fences, cafes that close early. Bought a plot near the Walnut Canyon Trail. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was far from anything that could be built on top of something. Stolen. My house has 2 bedrooms. The second became a workshop, not an art studio. A structure studio. I went back to what I used to do before Echo-Loop. Small, custom systems. Quiet tools. Things that don't make it into pitches, but fix processes from the inside out. I work with 3 steady clients. All referrals from Eleanor. All pay up front. None want my name anywhere. Exactly how I wanted it. The brown notebook stays locked in a drawer. Not for protection. For respect. I never sketched in it again. But I remember every page, every mark, every line I wrote before someone tried to erase me from the inside. Scout, my dog, wakes up early. Belgian Shepherd. Found him at a city shelter. In my 3rd month here, he'd been left behind by a couple who moved out of state. They said, he didn't fit in the new apartment. Some things you can't save. Others, you take in. He's sleeping at my feet now as I write this. Eleanor retired, sent me a letter 2 weeks ago. She moved to a cottage in Colorado, has a pepper greenhouse and 2 cats. At the bottom of the note, she wrote, "You did the right thing. The hardest way, which is the only way that actually changes the game." Howard, the lawyer, became a consultant. Only takes on ethical causes now. People swallowed in silence. Every couple of months he sends me an email. Just the subject line. Still clean. Last week I got a letter. Heavy paper. Handwritten. Envelope. It was from Marcia Green, the engineer from the other startup. The one who'd been erased too. Inside, just one sentence. "What you did saved me from thinking I was crazy. Thank you for proving that staying quiet isn't surrender." I pinned the letter to the door of the studio. Not for pride, but because sometimes we need to remember that justice exists even when no one applauds. I never spoke to Lindsay again. Not out of resentment, but because some bridges don't burn. They just fade with time, as if they were never built to last. Her name still shows up sometimes, in a comment, in a technical article, but never in bold. Echo-Loop didn't become anything. Not a scandal, not a legacy, just silence, like a cursed idea that evaporates after the last lie. My empathetic listening system, it still exists, with a different name, different code, different hands. Sometimes when the world feels too loud, I log into an old client. They don't know I built it, but they still use it. Still. Trust it. That's enough. This afternoon I took Scout for a walk. The sky was clear, the air warm, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't think about what had been taken from me, only about what I got to keep. We passed by an old wooden gate that creaked as I pushed it open. The sound was familiar, almost like the pipes back in the co-working space, years ago. Only now, no one was listening on the other side, and I was at peace with that.